I built that place outside Austin the way a man builds a life when nobody's handing him anything, one stubborn day at a time. I bought the land in my late 30s, back when vacation meant sleeping in on Sunday, and luxury meant a new pair of work boots that didn't bite your heel. The house wasn't big. It wasn't some glossy magazine showpiece. But it was mine, cedar trees out back, a little porch I framed twice because I didn't like the angle the first time, and floors I laid myself, plank by plank, after long days on other people's jobs. 15 years of weekends. 15 years of not yet. Not yet for the couch. Not yet for the nice refrigerator. Not yet for the fence. Because every spare dollar went back into that house. That night started ordinary. I ate leftover chili out of a chipped bowl. I sat in my recliner with my boots still on, telling myself I'd get up and take them off in a minute. The heater clicked. The fridge hummed. The kind of sounds you don't appreciate until they're gone. Then I smelled it. Not wood smoke, this was sharp, mean, chemical. Plastic melting. Wiring burning. Something unnatural. I opened my eyes and my throat tightened before my brain even caught up. The smoke alarm screamed like it had been waiting to panic. I stood up fast, and heat rolled along the floor like the house was breathing fire. I ran toward the hallway and the smoke hit my face hard, thick enough to make the room feel smaller. Every breath was a mistake. I got as far as the utility closet, yanked the door open, and saw flames crawling up the studs like they owned the place. The wiring spat sparks. The water heater glowed around the edges like a stove left on too long. That's when you understand something about fire. It doesn't negotiate. I slammed the door shut and ran for the front door. My eyes watered so bad I couldn't see straight. My lungs burned. I grabbed my wallet off the kitchen counter because your body has this weird instinct to save the one thing that proves you exist. Then I was outside, barefoot in damp grass, turning around to watch my life light up the dark. Flames shoved through the living room window like hands. The roofline caught and started to pop and crack. I could hear boards I'd cut and nailed myself snapping like dry bones. A neighbor down the road, Earl, an old ranch guy with a permanent squint, came flying in with his headlights bouncing across my yard. He jumped out in pajama pants and a coat, and the first thing he did was shove his phone into my hand. Call 911. I didn't even argue. I just stood there, shaking, watching the house I'd built like a promise become a bonfire. By the time the firefighters arrived, it was already a losing fight. They worked anyway, good men, doing what good men do. Water hit flame and turned to steam. The air smelled like wet insulation and burning pine and something else I can't name, something like grief made physical. Then the roof gave up. It didn't fall fast. It sagged first, groaning, like it was trying to hold on for my sake. Then it collapsed in a heavy roar that made the ground feel like it flinched. When the fire finally died down, what was left didn't look like a home. It looked like a lesson. Black framing. Bent metal. A chimney leaning like it couldn't believe what it had watched. The fire marshal took notes, asked questions. Did I smoke? Was I drinking? Any recent electrical work? I told him no, no, and no. I'd done everything right. Permits. Inspections. I couldn't afford to cheat the system even if I'd wanted to. The next morning I called my insurance company with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. I'd paid that premium every month like it was part of being an adult. Never missed. Never late. I wasn't the kind of guy who asked for help, and insurance was my way of making sure I wouldn't have to. The woman on the phone started with sympathy. You can hear the script, soft voice, careful words, I'm very sorry. Then she put me on hold, and when she came back, her voice had changed. Not cruel. Just protected. Like she was sitting behind glass. "Mr. Carter," she said, "we're seeing a documentation issue with the structure." "What issue?" "It appears the dwelling was still listed as owner-built, under construction on the most recent renewal." I blinked like she'd spoken another language. "You've been living in it." "I understand. But coverage is contingent upon accurate documentation." I argued. "I sent emails. I dug for paperwork. I drove into town and printed county records. I found inspection notes. I found photos I'd emailed years ago." I tried to speak like a reasonable man, but the truth is I was begging, and I hated myself for it. In the end, it came down to one stupid formality. A mismatch in square footage between one line and another. A box that hadn't been updated the way it should have been. A technicality. That word should be illegal when a man's standing in front of ash. I remember sitting on Earl's tailgate afterward, staring at my hands. They were still rough, still scarred from building that house, and now they looked useless. Like they belonged to a guy who'd wasted 15 years. That's when I called my friends. Guys I'd helped move. Guys I'd bailed out when a job ran long. Guys who'd eaten at my table and laughed about how we'd always have each other's backs. At first, they answered with shock and sympathy. Then I said, "Insurance isn't paying." And the air went hollow. Oh man, that's tough. I wish I could help, but yeah, things are tight right now. Within a week, the calls stopped. Text stopped. People who used to show up for a barbecue couldn't show up for a man who needed a hand. That's a hard education, finding out who's only around when you're useful. Earl offered me his spare room. He meant it, too. But pride is a stubborn disease, and I told myself I didn't want to be in anyone's way. So I did what I told myself would be just for a few nights. I slept in my truck. I parked in a well-lit lot on the edge of town. Walmart. Cameras. Other cars. Safety in numbers. I reclined the seat and stared at the ceiling fabric, listening to my own breathing like it belonged to a stranger. In the morning, I washed my hands in a public restroom. Cold water. Cheap soap. I looked in the mirror and saw a man with soot still under his nails and eyes that didn't know where home was anymore. And right there, staring at my own face, I understood a sentence that hit like a hammer. Nobody is coming. So I went to work. Not the kind of work you put on a resume. I started showing up at job sites early, where day laborers stood around with coffee and hope, waiting for a foreman who needed strong backs and didn't ask questions. A foreman named Ricky looked me up and down. My boots were cracked. My hoodie smelled faintly like smoke that wouldn't leave. "You know how to work?" he asked. "I built my own house," I said. He snorted. "Everybody says that. Give me one day. If I'm useless, don't pay me." He stared a second longer, then pointed at a stack of lumber. "All right, old man. One day." That first day, my hands split open. My shoulders screamed. My lungs still felt raw from that night. But I measured right. I cut straight. I carried more than the younger guys because I didn't have the luxury of pride anymore. At the end of the shift, Ricky shoved a folded wad of cash into my palm. "Be here tomorrow," he said. That night, sitting in my truck with my hands wrapped in duct tape because I didn't have gloves yet, I finally let myself feel it. The grief. The betrayal. The shame. I stared into the dark windshield and whispered one word, half a prayer, half a promise. Okay. No illusions. No soft edges. Just you, the dark, and whatever thoughts you didn't have time to deal with during the day. That Walmart parking lot became my address for a while. Same corner, under the same flickering light that buzzed like it was tired of being awake too. I learned which security guard worked which shift, which nights stayed quiet, and which ones filled up with RVs and other folks who were between chapters. You start to notice things when life shrinks like that. How loud a grocery cart sounds at midnight. How cold metal feels through denim. How dignity isn't something you lose all at once, it slips away in small trades. Every morning I'd wake up stiff, roll my shoulders, and remind myself I was still capable. That mattered more than comfort. I'd splash water on my face in a public restroom, scrub the smoke smell off my hands as best I could, and put on the same clean shirt I'd folded the night before like it was a uniform. Then I'd go find work. Construction sites don't ask for your story. They ask if you can lift, if you can listen, and if you'll show up again tomorrow. I liked that. Cash at the end of the day. No promises. No pity. Ricky kept me around. Not because I was the fastest, I wasn't, but because I didn't screw things up. I fixed other people's mistakes quietly. Reframed crooked studs. Releveled forms when nobody was looking. I'd been building long enough to see problems before they became expensive. "You're different," Ricky said one afternoon, handing me my pay. "You think like an owner." I shrugged. Habit. The truth was, once you've built something for yourself, you never really stop thinking that way. Even when it's gone. I kept my expenses low, because I had to. Gas. Cheap food. A gym membership I paid for just so I could shower without looking over my shoulder. I started parking near a 24-hour fitness place instead of Walmart. Quieter. Safer. Cleaner mirrors. Weeks passed. The fire site became a place I stopped visiting. Not because it didn't hurt, but because standing there didn't change anything. Ash doesn't answer questions. It just sits there, reminding you. What surprised me wasn't the loneliness. I expected that. What surprised me was the clarity. When everything unnecessary burns away, you get real clear on what matters. I stopped replaying conversations with friends who vanished. Stopped drafting speeches in my head about how unfair it all was. Anger takes energy, and I didn't have any to spare. Instead, I started planning. Not rebuilding the house, not yet. That felt too big. Too emotional. But I noticed something on job sites. Same complaint everywhere. "Man, good help is hard to find. Can't trust anyone to show up. Everybody wants top dollar but can't read a tape measure." I'd been hearing that my whole life, but this time it landed differently. One night, sitting in my truck eating a gas station sandwich, I did some math on a receipt. What I made per day. What I could save if I stayed disciplined. How much a used trailer cost. How many small repair jobs people put off because contractors wouldn't show up for anything under $1,000. I wasn't dreaming yet. I was calculating. I picked up small side jobs on weekends, fixing decks, repairing gates, replacing rotten trim. Stuff I could do alone. Stuff homeowners were grateful someone even answered the phone for. I borrowed tools when I had to. Bought my own when I could. Kept everything clean, organized, professional. Word spread faster than I expected. People talk when someone does what they say they will. One afternoon, an older woman handed me cash after I fixed her fence and said, "You remind me of my husband. He built everything himself too." That stuck with me longer than the money. By the third month, I wasn't sleeping in the truck every night. Sometimes I'd splurge on a cheap motel just to stretch out. I didn't tell anyone that, I didn't want to get used to comfort again too soon. The insurance appeal finally came back officially denied. Final. No more calls. No more arguments. I folded the letter neatly and put it in a folder. Not to dwell on it. To remember it. Because there are two kinds of lessons. The ones that make you bitter, and the ones that make you dangerous, in a quiet way. I chose the second. One night, parked under the same buzzing light, I realized something that made me laugh out loud, alone in my truck. They took my house. But they didn't take my skill. They didn't take my discipline. And they sure as hell didn't take my patience. Those were the expensive parts. That's when the plan stopped being about survival and started being about scale. Not tomorrow. Not next month. But soon. And for the first time since the fire, I slept without the seat reclined all the way back, like a man who knew this wasn't the end of the road, just a long shoulder before the next lane opened up. There's a moment you don't notice when it happens. One day you're just trying to get through the week. The next, you realize you're no longer reacting, you're deciding. That shift crept up on me quietly. By then, my truck wasn't just a place to sleep. It was a mobile office. Passenger seat stacked with invoices in a folder I kept dry no matter what. A notebook on the dashboard filled with phone numbers, measurements, rough sketches. I stopped writing things on receipts because that's what men do when they don't expect to last. I expected to last. The first real change came with a used trailer. I found it behind a tire shop, sun-bleached and dented, tires bald enough to make you nervous. The owner wanted too much. I didn't argue, I just pointed at everything wrong with it and waited. Silence is powerful when you don't need the answer. He dropped the price. I paid cash and towed it away feeling something I hadn't felt since before the fire. Momentum. With the trailer came freedom. Tools stayed organized. Jobs got faster. I could say yes to work I used to turn down. And people noticed. Not the flashy kind of notice, the quiet kind that spreads through neighborhoods and job sites. He shows up. He finishes. He doesn't disappear halfway through. That's rare currency. I stopped taking day labor jobs and focused on my own calls. Fence repairs turned into small remodels. Small remodels turned into repeat customers. A realtor started calling me whenever a sale fell apart over inspection issues. You save deals, she said once. You don't upsell. You solve. I liked that. The money got steadier. Not rich, but predictable. Predictability is where confidence grows. I rented a small storage unit. Then a second trailer. Then I hired a kid named Luis. Luis was 24, sharp-eyed, quiet. He didn't talk much about his past, and I didn't ask. Men who work hard usually have reasons. I paid him fair, taught him right, and told him the only rule that mattered. If you say you'll be somewhere, you're there. Even if it rains. Especially if it rains. He nodded like he understood something deeper than words. The first betrayal came from someone I trusted too quickly. A guy named Frank, older, charming, knew how to talk numbers, offered to help me scale. He had ideas, contacts, big language. He wanted a cut in exchange for managing scheduling and materials. It sounded good. I wanted to believe him. That cost me $6,000 and 2 clients. Frank vanished with deposits and excuses. Didn't answer calls. Didn't show up again. Same story, different face. The funny thing was, I didn't rage. I just sat in my truck afterward, stared at the steering wheel, and said out loud, "All right." Lesson noted. Pain teaches efficiency. From then on, everything went through me. No shared access. No blind trust. Systems instead of favors. I built checklists the same way I once framed walls, square, level, no shortcuts. More work came. Enough that I needed another crew. Enough that I stopped thinking like a tradesman and started thinking like an operator. That scared me a little. But fear isn't a stop sign, it's a signal. I registered the business properly. Got insurance again, real insurance, triple-checked. Opened a separate account. Hired a part-time bookkeeper who asked annoying questions I learned to appreciate. By the second year, I wasn't sleeping in my truck at all. I rented a small place, nothing fancy, just quiet. A table. A bed. A place to sit without shoes. I didn't rush to decorate. I learned how fast things could disappear. What mattered was this. I woke up every morning knowing exactly what I was building. Not a house. A foundation. One evening, after a long day, I drove past the old property by accident. The fire site was overgrown now. Weeds pushing through ash. Nature doing what it does, moving on without asking permission. I pulled over. Sat there with the engine running, hands on the wheel, waiting for something, anger, grief, bitterness. None came. Just a calm recognition. That place had burned down. But it hadn't burned me down. I drove away thinking about land instead. About space. About starting clean, without ghosts in the walls. The business name finally came to me that night, simple, solid, something that sounded like it would still make sense 20 years from now. And for the first time since the fire, I smiled without forcing it. Because this time, I wasn't rebuilding what I'd lost. I was building something that couldn't burn so easily. Success doesn't arrive like a parade. It shows up quiet. Unannounced. And usually while you're too busy working to notice it's already there. By the 5th year, I owned more than tools and trailers. I owned time. The business had grown the way solid things do, slow, deliberate, built to last. 1 crew turned into 3. 3 turned into 6. Each one with a lead who'd started where I started, showing up early, shutting up, learning fast. I didn't promise anyone riches. I promised consistency. Turns out, that's what men really want. We weren't flashy. No billboards. No radio ads. Just clean trucks. Clean paperwork. And a reputation that moved faster than money ever could. Home repairs turned into service contracts. Service contracts turned into maintenance agreements with property managers. Eventually, I stopped swinging a hammer every day and started walking sites with a clipboard instead, checking work, mentoring, correcting quietly. That was harder than the labor. Ego kills businesses faster than fire. I bought land the same way I bought everything else, when the numbers made sense and my hands didn't shake signing the papers. Nothing sentimental about it. Flat acreage outside town. Good soil. Good access. No memories attached. That mattered. The new house took 2 years. Not because it had to, but because I wanted it right. No rushing. No good enough. I built it like a man who'd learned what shortcuts really cost. Strong foundation. Simple lines. Windows placed for light, not appearances. A porch that faced the sunrise. I didn't rebuild the old house. I outgrew it. The day I moved in, I carried 1 box inside and sat on the floor for a while. No furniture yet. Just quiet. Sunlight on bare wood. A place that didn't owe me anything and didn't ask me to prove myself. That night, I slept deeper than I had in a decade. A year later, I bought the pickup. New. Clean. Paid in full. I remember gripping the steering wheel, laughing under my breath, not because of the truck, but because of the road behind it. Funny how life circles back. One afternoon, driving between jobs, I took the long way without meaning to. Same highway. Same bend. Same stretch of land where the old house once stood. The fire site was barely recognizable now. Grass had taken over. Trees leaned in. The scar had softened. I slowed down. Not out of anger. Not out of regret. Out of respect. For the man I used to be. For the nights in the truck. For the silence that taught me who I really was. I realized something sitting there with the engine idling. I didn't want it back. Not the house. Not the people who disappeared. Not even the version of me who thought security came from walls and paperwork. I drove on. Windows down. Sun on my arm. No weight in my chest. Just gratitude. Because the fire didn't ruin my life. It clarified it.